Okay, hi guys. Today's going to be a comfort food. We're going to do shepherd's pie, and part of the reason we're doing shepherd's pie today is that it's our camera person's favorite comfort meal. Back when she was at college, I would do up small little servings of these, freeze them up, and then she could take them to take them back to school and eat them whenever she needed to, whenever she was feeling low or missing her parents. Anyway, we're going to start. I want to start with potatoes because the potatoes are one of those things that people, you notice how I've cut them. I've kind of quartered them off or eighth them off or whatever, but the size of them depends because what happens is if they're too big, right, they'll take forever to cook. If they're too small, they'll be cooked way before I need them, okay? So you can see I've got them in the water going, right? I'm going to salt my water, about a teaspoon or so. That'll do two things. It'll help it'll help with a little bit of the flavor, and it also brings the boiling point up a little bit more. So I'm just going to turn those on high, full boil, and I'm going to put my lid on because that'll help with the convection or the boiling process. Because what happens is the heat gets trapped inside, and it starts to bounce off the top. So what happens is, as the water boils or gets hot, it'll bounce off of this and roll back in. So you'll get a rolling boil, okay? The reason behind shepherd's pie. Okay, what was shepherd's pie? Shepherd's pie was originally made from lamb, okay? Lamb and potatoes and whatever they had. Now, today's common version is shepherd's pie is with corn, right? But there's also other things you can use. I've used peas and carrots because that would be a standard rate. And this one's got corn and carrots and peas and squash. No, there's no carrots, sorry. It's corn, peas, and squash. Okay, and that's the middle layer. Okay, I've also got my seasonings, which I've got basil, thyme, and oregano. Kind of an Italian look at this kind of thing, but that's how I roll, right? I'm not Italian, but I love Italian food, and I love Italian seasonings. So what have we got? We've got a little bit of onion. We've got some garlic. Now, normally I would use, if I was cooking a lot, which I am now, I would use fresh garlic. But because I don't use a lot, cook a lot normally at home, I don't buy a lot of fresh garlic because it ends up going bad quickly. So next best thing is chopped garlic, and it's in a little bit of oil, right? And you can just see, right, what it looks like in there. And that's kind of how we roll now, because it's, there's all kinds of name brands and non-name brands, but that's how it goes, okay? So I'm just gonna finish up dicing the onion, just so you remember how to do this. Okay, so remember, when you want to dice, you want to go this way first. That's all the way down. Remember to keep your hand, the dog behind the fence. And then just chop. Make sure you go all the way through. And just keep your fingers out of the way. Out of the way. And there you go. So I'm just going to add that to my pan when the time comes. So I'm going to turn my pan on. And I'm going to start heating it up. But I don't want it at high. I want it at about a medium. Then I'm going to add my extra virgin olive oil. Now, depending on where you live, the Greeks claim to have the best virgin olive oil. The Italians claim to have the best virgin olive oil. What that is virgin olive oil comes from the first press of the oil, right? So if you want extra virgin olive oil, generally it's, and you can see this in Italy, but it's from olives that haven't touched the ground. They're picked off the tree. In fact, they put nets around the trees in Italy to catch the olives in case they don't get through them fast enough. And then they press them, and that's how you get your first press or your extra virgin olive oil. Cold press, doesn't matter that way. Okay, just going to let this heat up a little bit. I'm going to add my onion. And you can hear and you can see the sizzle. That means my oil is ready. And I'm just going to add all of my pre-chopped, obviously, some onion here. I'm just going to turn it down a little bit to about medium. And I'm just going to add the rest of my onion that I cut off the board. Notice I've set up my pad properly. My knife and my pad, and everything is where it's supposed to be. Now I'm just going to let this sweat out a little bit. And that's probably, I'm going to say, that's probably maybe just a little bit more than 4 ounces of onion. Probably more like 6. I don't mind onion in this kind of meal because I'm going to cook it down. It's going to get sweeter as it cooks. And I like to always preheat or pre-cook my onion no matter what I'm doing. I don't enjoy raw onion, so just let that go. Meanwhile, I'm going to find my garlic again. I'm going to add a teaspoon of garlic. And I have to be careful with garlic because I realize it's part of the onion family, but it's also very delicate. So if your onions, if you put it in too soon or it's too hot a heat, that's a teaspoon. It won't work very well. It'll burn. Right? We don't want it to burn. We don't want anything to really start caramelizing in this. Although if it does turns a little brown or golden, that's okay. So this is going to take on 2 different kinds of cooking. It's going to take on, and they're both dry cooking methods. But we're going to, first of all, we're going to saute the onions. Then we're going to saute the burger. Then we're going to build our menu and then our dish. Now the one thing I always talk about, right, is when we're talking about food and flavors, right, we want to build the flavors, right? Because we're adding different seasonings and we're adding different things, everything's part of the construction. So it's like a building brick or whatever, but we're building the flavors. So we started with onion, we've added garlic. We're now going to do our ground beef. All right. And you want to make sure you chop that up really, really fine. Now, of course, you don't want this to go raw into your dish, but you also don't want to cook it so dry that it's like nuggets. It should be moist when you're done and just lightly browned off. If it's too dry, it just doesn't work. And a little bit of that was still frozen. That's okay. It'll break down as the heat gets to it. Now I'm using I may not have to drain the fat off of this, but we'll have to wait and see, because I'm using a very lean ground beef. But even then, sometimes, you just want to mix everything through. So now's the time. I'm just going to let this cook a little bit more. I'm going to add my seasonings. Okay. And I'm going to add a teaspoon of each one. So it's a teaspoon of thyme. Teaspoon of oregano. Put the lid back on there before and a teaspoon of basil. Now these are dry, so they need time to cook out. They need time to moisturize, or because they're dehydrated, we need that to come back. going to check my potatoes. Okay, now you can see that there's the rolling boil. That didn't take very long, and that's because I had the lid on it. Now, these should be ready when they're pierceable with a fork or a small knife. So, if they're too hard, the knife won't go through. Okay, so they'll need a few more minutes. Just going to trim them down a little bit because these are very, okay. So, here we go. I'm going to just chop this all up and get it cooking. I want to work all my vegetables through it. Now at this point you can add, shepherd's pie is one of those things that becomes a fan favorite or a family favorite, and everybody does it differently, right? Some add cream corn, some add gravy, some add whatever. It's just one of those things that you can decide what goes in yours, okay? So I'm going to add just a little bit of Worcestershire sauce, right? A couple of shakes, maybe about a half a teaspoon or so. Right? And that's just to help bolster the flavors, right? Then I'm going to add about, I don't know, half a teaspoon of salt. Right, it's about a half a teaspoon. Remember, salt's the flavor enhancer. You want to make sure that there's no red left. That everything's mixed in really, really well. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, now you can see that it's pretty much, the pink's all but gone, and it's going to finish up in the oven anyway. So now I'm going to strain out the fat. I've decided that there's just a little too much in here for my liking. So there's a couple ways I can do this. I'm going to strain it into a bowl, then I'm going to strain the fat from the bowl into a grease jar, and then I'll deal with that after, okay? So just to this is where I miss having my China cap or chinois, which is special for this. I could just dump it in and then drain it off. Okay. So now I'm going to add about a tablespoon of flour. Now that'll just help to bind it a little bit and make a little bit of a gravy with a little bit of moisture that's left in there. Just make sure you get that all cooked in and mixed in. Okay, so now the next thing. What stage am I going to be at? Am I going to want a layer? Am I going to want a layer of meat and a layer of vegetables and a layer of potatoes? Or do I want to put this all together and mix my vegetables with it? I think I'm going to do a combination. I'm going to add a little bit of the vegetable to it, and then I'm going to, because all ends up all looking the same anyway, but I'm just going to add a little bit in here. I'm just going to mix that all up inside. Now I'm going to add it to my pan. Start building my dish. Try to get that as even across as I can. And I want to pack it down a little bit because I do want it to hold its shape. Now I'm just going to add my peas and my squash and my corn. Spread that out. Try to get it as... The thing about corn is when you use corn and just corn, you're adding two starches. You're adding... Corn's not a vegetable, right? It's a starch, it's a grain. So you're adding starch from that. Okay, so now my potatoes look like they're pretty much done, and there you go. A fork or a knife goes through quite easily. So now I'm just going to strain them and let them, what they call, steam out a little bit. Okay, and then I'll add them back to the pot with a little bit of butter and some milk. Okay, so now you can see that my potatoes are all done. They've steamed out a little bit. They're still really, really hot. I'm going to add a little bit of milk. I'm going to say about 1/4 cup, but I'm not 100% sure. And I'm just going to add a little bit of butter. Couple of tablespoons. And I'm just going to whip that all up. Make sure I get it as whipped and mashed as I possibly can. Okay, so there's my mashed potatoes. They're all said and done. I'm just going to scoop them up, and I'm going to use my portion scoop just to kind of to distribute the potatoes around. Because if you try to plop them in too soon or not even as best you can, sometimes it just doesn't work out that well. So I'm just going to scoop it all in. I'm just going to lots of mashed potatoes, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure this dish is nice and full and ready to go. Oh, now I'm just going to gently push these around into each corner. All right, and spread it out. Try to make it as even as I possibly can. What I'm trying to do, and that's why you need lots of mashed potatoes, is I don't want the corn and that coming up through. Right, I just want to make sure that everything's covered as best as I can and that it's nice and even. Okay. Now I'm just gonna, and this is kind of, I just like to do it. Alright, just kind of decorate it up a little bit. There you go, folks. So that's going in the oven now for about a half an hour, so everything kind of heats back up through. Get a little bit of browning on the potatoes, a little bit, maybe a splash of butter if you want it to. But then hopefully it'll be, well, it won't hopefully, it will be our supper tonight. So ladies and gentlemen, till the next time I see you, remember, somebody loves you. It's just not me.